Hello guys, hello Laravel developers. Have you ever tried working with Symfony? If not, let's try it together in this video. So recently on this channel I've reviewed this API platform, which was historically for Symfony and now supports Laravel. And then I thought, wait, I haven't touched Symfony in many years. About 15 years ago I tried Symfony, tried to install it. I didn't like it at the time and switched to CodeIgniter. Laravel didn't exist then yet, so I decided to see what Symfony is about these days in 2024 and how easy it is to get started. So in this video I will try to create a CRUD with Symfony, very simple one, and compare that with Laravel process of creating such CRUD, and later I will try to run through that code that was generated with Symfony CLI commands, what is the structure of that typical CRUD, and again, what is the difference from Laravel. And disclaimer, which is kind of obvious, but still, I'm not a Symfony developer. So in this video, I may make mistakes, I may say some nonsense thing, I may not know some Symfony option or feature, so feel free to correct me in the comments or teach me something I don't know. So let's dive into Symfony, but first, a quick reminder how I would create a typical CRUD in Laravel, very quickly. So tools and prerequisites, Laravel CRUD and Laravel installer, which actually got easier. Very recently they released php.new URL website and the logic that helps anyone starting with Laravel to install all of those things automatically. But in my case, I do have those already, so Laravel new project, some wizard, no starter kit, pest, and default stuff. For the database I choose SQLite. And yeah, cd project, and now we continue with generating the code, which is mostly generated from the terminal with artisan commands, right? And what is a better way to compare Laravel versus Symfony than to create a to-do list, right? So this is exactly what I will do. Make model task with migration, with controller, and that controller will be resourceful. So we generate all of that. Now we open the PHP Storm, fill in the migrations. In the model we fill in fillable or guarded, personal preference. Then in the routes we do route resource to that task controller that we had just generated, and inside of that controller we have all those methods ready for us. So we fill that in. I will do that behind the scenes. So there we go. It took roughly 5 minutes in the background for me. So task all and return the view. Create blade, also return the view. Validation is in line. I didn't use any form requests for simplicity. Then show, edit, and update and destroy. Pretty simple. Now, of course, we run those migrations. So PHP artisan migrate. And at this point, we should have a URL/tasks just without the blade files. So in my experience, probably the biggest, the most time-consuming part of Laravel CRUD is actually blade and front-end visuals. HTML, CSS, whatever theme or template you use, that part is kind of outside of Laravel backend and usually created manually because each design is individual. Of course, you can use starter kit like Laravel Breeze, which will give you the design. But again, for simplicity, I will not do any of that to compare apples to apples with Symfony, and will just create simple blade views. So this is the index blade without any design, so task list with the table. And this is the create blade form, again, without any design. It took me like 3 minutes to type both of them from memory without any validation, just for simplicity. And here we have the URL of task. We add new task, we can use fake fill a Chrome extension to fill in something, we save, and we do have that name and description in the table. Again, for simplicity, I will not implement edit and delete because this video is not about Laravel. I just wanted to quickly recap the principle of how I would do that with Laravel, but now let's go to Symfony. First thing you need to know is that Symfony has Symfony CLI, similar to Laravel installer, which you can also install pretty easily with one of those commands, which I did behind the scenes. And then we go Symfony new project. Sounds familiar? Project 2, let's make it in another folder with one flag called web app. We will build a web application, right? And then it's all kind of done behind the scenes, and I'm still using Laravel CRUD for this, and this actually will work for Symfony projects too. Will automatically serve the URL. So we'll have project2.test. Okay, project is now ready. So now if we go and type in project2.test, welcome to Symfony 7. So, similar installer to Laravel. That's the first step. Now let's create the database structure. And for that, we'll run a set of commands pretty similar to PHP artisan. In this case, it's PHP bin console make entity, or will be make something. And in this case, entity is kind of like Laravel eloquent model. Task, and we will have a wizard. What fields do we want inside? So let's create it in a wizard. That's the difference from Laravel. So name, string, default length, nullable no default, and the file is updated. We will get to the source of the file a bit later, and we can now hit return or add more fields, which I will do in this case: description, text, which is auto-completed by the way in the terminal, nullable yes in this case, and updated. Now we hit return and we have the file generated. The file of Eloquent model, which in case of Symfony is entity and repository. Again, we'll get to that in a minute. Now the next step is hinted here right away: make migration. I will clear it up for you: make migration. So let's run that. And now we hit the error that we didn't configure our database, no connection. So we go to .env file, similar how in Laravel we have .env, but with a different structure. So we need to uncomment. By default, the database is PostgreSQL, so this, we will comment that out and we will enable SQLite. And I will not change anything else in this file, at least for now. And now if we run the migration, success. So it generated the migration file from the model, from the entity. And now to run that in the database, we run this: php bin console doctrine migrations migrate. Paste, run, some warning, yes, success. So now we have the database in SQLite. And now the main thing: make CRUD, the command that does not exist in Laravel. We make CRUD task, name controller, let's leave it as default. Do you want to generate tests? Experimental? No. And these are the files that are generated. And now I don't need to configure any routes. Let's try to go to /task, project2.test/task, not tasks, but task. And we have our CRUD, it seems like. No records found, create new, fake filler Chrome extension, save, show, edit, ... update, update, successful, edit, delete, confirmation, OK, works. So we have our first Symfony CRUD. So to recap the process of installation of the CRUD, it's very similar, but in case of Symfony, it's even easier. So there's make CRUD command. There's a wizard to create the columns in the Eloquent model in the entity in this case. Also, blade files or twig files, we will get to that, are generated for us. Also, we don't need to care about any routing. So on the surface, my first impression, I'm pretty impressed with Symfony CRUD installer and the process. And now, as kind of the second part of this video that I announced already, let's go through those files generated for us by Symfony. So to emphasize, I haven't opened PHP Storm in that process. It was all done with the terminal, so we just need to review those files and make changes if we want to. And let's try to understand or interpret that Symfony code from the eyes of myself as Laravel developer. So first, migrations, and there's up method with create table, so the migrations are in plain SQL language. So we have create table task, which is singular, not pluralized by default. I guess it's configurable, but with the fields that we described. So these are migrations. They are not in specific language. It's add SQL with SQL language. And there's also down method. So the structure of up and down is similar to Laravel. Next, we go to src controller and task controller file. And this is where the routes come from annotations on the methods. And there were attempts to do that in Laravel, in version Laravel 5 from what I remember. And now you have a separate Spotty package if you want to use those route annotations. But as a feature in Laravel core, it was rejected and removed in Laravel 5 point something from what I remember. In Symfony, as you can see, the routes are here. And we have the index method to show the list of tasks. It renders the twig file, which is different from blade, and gets the tasks from task repository. Then new, not create method, new method, which is responsible for both form and its submission. As I understand, the show method is pretty clear and short, and then edit is roughly similar to the new method, also responsible for both, and then delete. So different syntax, different parameters, but structure is in a way the same. And now I remember what I didn't like in Symfony at the time, 15 years ago when I tried it. Too many layers of some repositories and interfaces, even though I wanted to create a simple project. So this logic didn't change. As you can see, there's task repository and entity manager interface for just a simple CRUD, but let's see what's inside. Task repository, it's actually empty, so I guess it is used for configuring queries. So this repository is created automatically on top of or in addition to the entity task, which is actually like Eloquent model. And in here, all the database fields are described similarly how you would do that in Livewire component, I guess, column by column with their own attributes for rules for validation. Then also getters are automatically generated and setters as well. So this is the structure of entity. Also important part is this create form. Symfony has its own kind of form builder, as I understand it correctly. So there's task type class, which is generated in src form task type with methods of build form and configure options. So this is used to build the form logic. And on the front end, we have twig file, which is not in src. They are separate in templates, which is roughly similar to resources views in Laravel. And we have templates base HTML automatically generated, and also task folder with, for example, index.html.twig, which is similar to .blade.php in Laravel. And the syntax is a bit different. The language of Twig is a bit different from Blade, but you can roughly understand it. It's pretty readable. So blocks instead of sections, extending the layout of base Twig, then for loop, and task name and description, and links to show and edit. And if we go to the new HTML twig, this is where it includes the form that was pre-generated by that form builder, as I called it. So yeah, this is kind of a rough structure of Symfony CRUD generated with just terminal without even changing anything in PHP Storm or other IDE. And overall, I'm still pretty impressed. So if you want to start with Symfony for a very small demo project just for yourself, I guess you can get started very quickly. Then, of course, you would need to learn what is entity, what is repository, how that all works, how to customize things, and more features of Symfony. But I don't want to dive into that in this video, at least for now. But actually, let me know, do you want me to dive deeper into Symfony? I'm not trying to create any Symfony daily or something like that, at least for now. But would you want me to create some kind of mini course or longer video trying to implement more features on top of Symfony CRUD? Let me know in the comments below. And yeah, what do you think in general? Laravel versus Symfony. They're kind of enemies or frenemies, friends, enemies. And I know many Laravel developers who look at Symfony like, ooh, Symfony, I wouldn't use that, and vice versa. But it's actually pretty beneficial to sometimes look on the other side to learn something which may be adopted into your framework or into your process. So what would you take from Symfony process or code into Laravel? Let's discuss that question and other related questions in the comments below. That's it for this time, and see you guys in other videos.